So human digestion starts off with ingestion. This is when you're taking in the food, and it would be followed by digestion. So we have two types of digestion. We have the physical digestion. So this is you using your teeth to break down the food into smaller pieces, and also the stomach muscles, okay, which can turn those food into smaller pieces. Okay. We also have chemical digestion. So this would be using enzymes to break down those food from a large insoluble molecule to a soluble molecule so that it can be absorbed into the blood. Okay. So which brings us to the next process, absorption. So this is all the movement of those nutrients that has been broken down into the small intestine. Okay, through the intestine wall into your blood. And once it has been absorbed into the blood, it would be taken into the cell where it would be assimilated. So assimilated means the molecules just become part of the cell. And the final process, it ends with egestion. So egestion is the removal of the waste product. Okay, so let's take a look into the journey of a sandwich. Okay, so remember, all these processes starts in your mouth, okay, where you have your teeth. Okay, so you have to describe this process. You can talk about physical digestion using your teeth, the incisor, the canine, the premolar and molar, okay, to break down those food into smaller pieces. Okay, and then in your mouth as well, keep in mind we do have an enzyme, okay, the amylase. So in your saliva, we have amylase, which can break down starch into maltose. So remember, maltose is a smaller form of carbohydrate. It's not the smallest, but it's small enough. Okay, and then the food goes into the esophagus. So remember, that's the tube that runs through your throat. Okay, so the food moves down by what we call peristalsis. Okay, so that's like a wave-like motion. Imagine like a pipe. Okay, it contracts, pushing the food through, and then it relaxes. So the food basically is like a wave-like motion, pushing the food all the way into the stomach. Okay, remember the stomach is also involved in physical digestion. So that's the muscle churning the food into smaller pieces. And then we also have the enzyme pepsin. So pepsin is a type of protease enzyme. Okay, remember the word protease sounds a lot like protein. So it will break down protein into amino acid. Okay, the smallest form of protein, amino acid. Okay, and then from there, the food will go into the small intestine. So remember that there will be accessory organ that will be releasing some enzymes into the small intestine, such as your liver. Yes, sir. Let me just clarify that. Okay, the liver does not release enzyme, but it does release bile. Okay, so bile is a very important substance. If you remember, it's involved in something known as emulsification. Okay, what happens during emulsification is if you have like a large fat globule, it will break it down into smaller fat globule. Okay. And other accessory organs involved here as well would be like your pancreas. Okay, so your pancreas would release 3 enzymes. Okay, just like the small intestine would also release these 3 enzymes. So what are these enzymes? They are trypsin. Okay, so that's another type of protease enzyme. It would release maltase. So remember, maltase sounds a lot like maltose. So it will break down maltose into the smallest form of carbohydrate, which is glucose. And then finally, also we have lipase, which sounds a lot like lipid. Okay, so can you remember what lipids are made up of? Okay, so if you answered fatty acid and glycerol, you would be right. Okay, so after all this chemical digestion has taken place, the small intestine will do absorption. Okay, will be involved in absorption. So all those nutrients will be taken into the blood. Okay, and then from there, whatever is not digested, okay, will remain in the small intestine. Okay, there will be some more absorption of water happening here, okay, before all the food will go into your rectum. Okay, so sorry, it's not food anymore, it's feces. Okay, so those undigested product, whatever's remain, whatever's left is going to be feces that is going to be stored in your rectum before it goes out through the anus. Okay, so yes, if you need um summary of this, right? Summary of the enzymes involved. Okay, keep in mind in your mouth, it is just a type of carbohydrate digestion. So that is amylase enzyme breaking down starch into maltose. And then the next area where chemical digestion happen would be in your stomach. So this is only protein digestion done by pepsin. And then as the food ends up in the small intestine, okay, this is where enzymes from the enzyme from the pancreas, okay, as well as bile from the liver comes in, okay, as well as enzymes that are also produced in the small intestine. So basically, as you go into the small intestine, it will be all three major groups. Okay, you will have the maltase, okay, which breaks down the maltose into sugar or glucose. And then you will have trypsin, which will break down protein into amino acids. And finally, lipase, which will break down lipid into fatty acid and glycerol. Okay, so that is basically a very quick summary of everything. Okay, so try remember, okay, only one group is broken down, one food group is broken down in the mouth, also only one in the stomach. But as you go down into the small intestine, it would be the three major food groups. Okay, so that is how you can remember this, and I hope that's helpful for you to do your homework. Okay, all right, bye.